Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. On a warm autumn evening in 2014, the small town of Millstone, North Carolina, lay cloaked in a deceptive calm. The golden leaves floated down, swirling gently with the crisp breeze, as families settled into their homes. The familiar sounds of laughter and clinking dinnerware permeating the air. Yet, within this picturesque landscape, a profound sense of dread was quietly brewing. Around 9 p.m., the tranquility shattered as local law enforcement received a frantic 911 call. The voice on the line belonged to Michael Hart, a 25-year-old nurse recently returned to her hometown from a bustling city life. She sobbed uncontrollably, her words spilling over each other in desperate urgency. "He's gone! Please, just come!" When officers arrived at the Hart residence, the front door stood ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Emily was found huddled on the living room floor, surrounded by scattered photographs and an overturned coffee table. The remnants of a once cozy space now served as a haunting tableau, hinting at chaos and confusion. Searching for serenity amidst the storm, she pointed toward the hallway, virtually paralyzed with fear. Down the hall. He's in there," she murmured, her voice wavering. As officers approached the closed bedroom door, an ominous silence enveloped the house. With a gentle push, they entered the room, equipped only with flashlights and determination, their hearts pounding with the unsettling anticipation of what they might find. For the inhabitants of Millstone, the idyllic evening was about to give way to the raw reality of darkness lurking beneath their peaceful facade. The victim. Inside the dimly lit bedroom, the officers were greeted by a harrowing scene. The stale scent of despair clung to the air, heavy and suffocating. A figure lay motionless on the floor, sprawled in a disarray that suggested a violent struggle. It was Michael Hart, Emily's younger brother, his 30-year-old frame marred by the unmistakable signs of trauma. Blood pooled around him, stark against the pale carpet, a grim reminder of the sudden violence that had upended their lives. Michael had been a beacon of light in the quiet town, a devoted brother, and an aspiring artist known for his vibrant murals that adorned the sides of buildings in Millstone's town. Little did anyone know that behind his cheerful exterior lay battles of his own. Those closest to him recognized the mounting pressure. The ambitious dreams were often stifled by self-doubt and mental health struggles he chose to mask with humor. As investigators processed the scene, they exchanged glances, each understanding the dynamic at play here. Emily had described that night as an ordinary gatheringa dinner where they reminisced about childhood memories and shared laughter. Yet, that ordinary facade had crumbled, revealing an undercurrent of strife. What could have unfolded in the moments leading up to Michael's demise? The officers carefully inspected the room for evidence, documenting every detail. The shattered frame of a family photo caught the light-up, perfect snapshot of happiness now disrupted. Questions began to swirl in their minds. Was this an intrusion, or had Michael been involved in something darker? For Emily, the horrifying discovery meant she was now both witness and suspect in the rapidly unfolding investigation. The fragile thread connecting memory and tragedy began to unravel, casting her in a new light under the scrutiny of a small-town tragedy. The crime scene. The stark glow of the forensic lights cast eerie shadows across the chaotic bedroom illuminating the specifics of an unsettling crime scene. Officer Reynolds, a seasoned investigator, squatted low next to Michael's lifeless form, noting every detailed angle of his body, the splatter of blood, and the various scuff marks that hinted at a struggle. The rug beneath him bore witness to frantic thrashing as life had ebbed away. "Looks like a fight broke out here," he murmured, jotting down his observations. Discarded items, a spilled ink bottle, a couple of paintbrushes, an overturned easelware strewn like memories lost in a recent storm, hinting at Michael's explosive passion for art. Reynolds wondered if a creativity-fueled rage had contributed to whatever transpired in the early hours of that terrible night. As the coroner arrived, the somber reality began to settle in. They carefully examined Michael's wounds, 3 deep lacerations across his torso, inflicted by a sharp object. The brutality of it suggested a crime of passion, something personal. Meanwhile, the officers navigated the small room, piecing together the timeline and relationships that might have led to this momentous rupture. The walls told their own story, adorned with vibrant artwork that displayed Michael's soul. Bright colors juxtaposed against the stark reality of his demise, as if the canvases themselves lamented the loss of their creator. Each piece had a name, each brushstroke part of a narrative cut short. At that moment, a scream shattered the solemn era raw outcry from the living room. Emily, previously only a shadow in the background, suddenly surged into view, terror-stricken and disoriented. Her eyes, wide and uncomprehending, locked onto the crime scene with dread. What memory was now lodged irretrievably in her mind? The contrast of her fragile form against the dark reality of loss conjured a haunting juxtaposition. The vivid memories of Michael's laughter clashing violently with the gruesome tableau of his final moments. The investigation had, without warning, transformed from a search for a killer into a heart-wrenching attempt to understand the tragic unraveling of a family. The early investigation, with the haunting cries of Emily echoing in their ears, the officers focused their attentions on the scene, realizing that amidst chaos, they had to methodically piece together the fragments of a shattered life. Officer Reynolds assigned his partner, Officer Simmons, to interview Emily while he oversaw the crime scene investigation. As painful as it was, they knew their next steps could prove vital in uncovering the truth. Sitting at the dining room table, Emily fought to contain her emotions, her hands trembling as she pressed the palm of one hand to her forehead, attempting to regain composure. "I don't understand. How could this happen?" Her voice was a soft whisper, laced with shock. Michael had recently gotten involved with a group of friends, I guess. They called themselves the Collective. Something about it felt off, but he insisted they were good people. Officer Simmons quickly took notes. "And did he ever mention any conflicts? Any reason to feel threatened?" "No, he wouldn't talk about it," Emily replied, shaking her head as tears streamed down her cheek. "He was so passionate about his art, too passionate maybe. I just wanted him to focus on his future, not get tangled up with reckless people. I tried, I really did." As Emily recounted her brother's last few weeks, Reynolds further excavated the room. He scoured every inch, seeking out any hidden details that could shed light on Michael's final days. Letters, phone numbers, and crumpled receipts littered the desk evidence that revealed a life in flux but offered no solid leads. Nearby, a set of footprints caught his attention, leading to the closed window, slightly ajar. A glimmer of hope flickered. An authorized entrance. He bent to take photographs, speculating whether an outsider was involved or if this was an internal struggle turned dead. The thought danced in his mind, intertwining with Emily's words about the collective, swirling in the uncertainty of betrayal and passion, with lingering questions hanging heavy in the air. The small town of Millstone braced itself for the truth that lay yet undiscovered, a truth that would force those who knew love and laughter to confront their deepest fears. What daydreams had turned into nightmares, and who would ultimately pay the price? The dead ends. As the days wore on, the investigation into Michael Hart's murder progressed at a pace that felt achingly slow. Officer Reynolds and Officer Simmons pursued every lead, conducting interviews with acquaintances, neighbors, and potential witnesses. Yet each conversation led them further down a labyrinth of dead ends. The idyllic facade of Millstone, often painted as a quiet refuge, now seemed to veil a deeper trepidation. Emily remained confined to her home, her grief palpable, as Reynolds attempted to reach out, encouraging her to talk more about her brother's recent connections. Emily, any detail, no matter how small, could prove crucial. She nodded, but her eyes reflected a profound weariness, the ache of loss settling into her bones. One of the last places they needed to visit was the local bar, the Rusty Nail, where Michael frequently met with members of the collective. Under dimmed lights, fellow patrons shared tales of Michael's vibrant conversations, but no one spoke of violence. The bartender recalled a recent heated discussion between Michael and a newcomer to the group, a man named Jared. He had this intense energy, like he wanted to prove he was bigger than life. Michael didn't seem to appreciate it, she added, handing over the new member's details. Yet, when Reynolds and Simmons attempted to track Jared down, their search stalled. His whereabouts were unverifiable, and it appeared he had left town shortly after the murder. With each passing day, evidence collected from Michael's home yielded little to explain his death. Social media sleuthing revealed his art posts had garnered attention, garnering comments from both friends and critics, including accusations of being self-indulgent and pretentious conflicting views that swirled into a vortex of discontent among artists envious of his talent. The weight of their findings began to bear heavier than before. Hindered by dead ends and the weight of uncertainty, they returned to the crime scene for fresh eyes, desperately searching for clues that had slipped through their grasp. Every shadow felt laden with missed opportunities, and every unanswered question echoed in their minds. As the sun began to set on another day, Reynolds stood in the doorway of the Hart residence, a worn notepad in hand, searching for inspiration among the mundane, sifting through unresolved emotions, buried secrets, and a looming dread. In a town that revered its simplicity, a pulse of darkness pulsated, waiting to be unveiled. A break in the case. Just when the weight of uncertainty threatened to suffocate the investigation, an unexpected break arrived like a gust of wind slicing through the autumn chill. It came in the form of an anonymous tip submitted to the Millstone Police Department's tip line, its contents igniting a flicker of hope amongst the investigators. The tipster claimed to have witnessed a confrontation at the Rusty Nail between Michael Hart and Jared, the enigmatic newcomer. Detailed descriptions painted a vivid picture: raised voices, a pushed drink, and a scuffle that spilled onto the bar's sidewalk. They said it was heated, significant enough that there was anger in the air, like something was brewing. Officer Reynolds felt a surge of adrenaline. This could be the lead they so desperately needed. He and Officer Simmons were quick to follow up, poring over security footage from the Rusty Nail's exterior cameras. After hours of scouring the grainy images, they finally spotted Michael and Jared, just before Michael's untimely demise, angry gestures, and a palpable tension crackling between them. The images were grainy, but there was no mistaking the way Michael's body language seemed defensive, as if he was braced for something much worse than mere words. Fueled by this newfound insight, the officers then launched a full-fledged search for Jared's last known whereabouts, his connections to Michael. Anything that could provide them the answers they required. Newly invigorated, they traversed the neighboring counties, canvassing every lead. Days passed, and just as skepticism began to creep back in, a breakthrough occurred. An officer reported that Jared had been spotted at a roadside diner just across state lines, a place characterized by neon lights and hand-painted signs. Reynolds and Simmons were quick, with urgency propelling them forward, images of Michael's lifeless body replaying in their minds, a reminder of the stakes at hand. When they arrived, the diner was alive with the smell of coffee and the nostalgic hum of diner chatter. They found Jared, seemingly oblivious to the scrutiny surrounding him. As they approached, the weight of the case coalesced into the charged air between FEMA confrontation, not just of individuals, but of lives irreversibly altered by choices made in passion and anger. They were closing in, but with tension coiling tighter. They knew the next moment could unravel their newfound lead into chaos. The suspect, seated in a booth at the diner, Jared's eyes darted nervously as Officer Reynolds and Officer Simmons approached. He was a tall man in his early 30s, with tousled brown hair and a beard that obscured a sullen jawline, giving him an air of careless defiance. Eloquent, yet dripping with an overconfident bravado, he flashed a fleeting smile as the officers slid into the booth across from him. "Jared?" Reynolds inquired, his voice firm yet measured as he laid the cards on the table. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about Michael Hart." The light in Jared's eyes dulled, morphed into something defensive. "Michael? Wow, what a wild guy. We had our moments," he said, feigning nonchalance as he casually stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking against the porcelain like the ticking of a time bomb. "It got heated sometimes. You get passionate in the moment," Jared replied, shrugging dismissively. Reynolds eyed him closely, noting the way he avoided eye contact, his fingers twitching on the table's surface. "We're aware that there was an argument between the two of you at the Rusty Nail a few nights before his death. Witnesses say it got pretty intense. What happened?" Reynolds leaned in, hoping to fracture the facade Jared had put up. Jared hesitated. "Look, man, it was just talk. I don't even remember much. We're artists. It gets volatile." But the nervous tension in his voice betrayed him. The officers exchanged knowing glances, an unspoken agreement passing between them. They pressed on, asking him about his whereabouts the night Michael was killed. But Jared's answers only spiraled into more vague deflections. "Is this the part where you want to arrest me?" he finally huffed, his bravado slipping. "Because we're artists, not criminals." "Just trying to determine if you're involved," Simmons replied, the bite of her voice cutting through the pretense. "People don't just die without reason, Jared. You were in Millstone the night of the murder around the Hart residence. Potentially that night, someone took Michael's life. The truth hung heavy in the air, coiling around them like the dense diner smoke that began to fill the space. A sense of imminent revelation lingered, a twist of fate hidden beneath bravado and denial. The walls seemed to close in, each tick of the clock amplifying the tension, while shadows of doubt loomed, promising that the real story of Michael's death was still shrouded, waiting for these two officers to untangle the threads that bound Jared to the tragedy. The trial. Months had passed since that fateful night in Millstone, and the air now buzzed with anticipation as the courtroom filled with familiar faces, friends, family, and townsfolk who had watched the tragedy unfold. The trial of Jared Thompson was set to begin, captivating the very community that had felt the ripples of Michael Hart's violent loss. An anticipatory hush swept over the room. The prosecution wasted no time laying out a compelling narrative of jealousy and confrontation. They presented the evidence gathered by Officer Reynolds and Simmons, including video footage from the Rusty Nail and witness testimonies that painted Jared as a volatile figure consumed by ambition and rivalry. Michael Hart was not merely a victim. He was a beacon for emerging artists, the prosecutor claimed, his voice resonating with emotion. Jared Thompson could not bear the shadow cast by his talent, leading to a tragic eruption fueled by jealousy. The defense, however, mounted an unexpected counter-narrative. They argued that Jared was a scapegoat, a man who had fallen into a conspiratorial trappa social experiment gone awry among the artsy crowd. They suggested that Michael's life was filled with risky influences, and that it was likely someone else, an anonymous villain, had committed the crime. As the case unfolded, Emily Hart found herself sitting in the front row, battling her own emotions. Each testimony felt like a fresh wound, their implications a cruel reminder of her brother's absence. She had spoken candidly on the stand about her relationship with Michael, his dreams, and his struggles, the weight of his life now resting heavily on her slender shoulders. But the trial's most harrowing testimony arrived in the form of a key witness, a fellow member of the collective who had been in the bar that night and claimed to have seen the confrontation between Jared and Michael escalate. It wasn't just art they were fighting over. They were fighting over everything: identity, recognition, validation. The witness said, their voice quaking, eyes shifting nervously as the jury listened intently. The tension in the courtroom reached a crescendo as closing arguments approached. The prosecution painted a picture of a man driven to darkness, while the defense spun tales of ambiguity and unpredictability. Every word echoed, ricocheting off the walls, burrowing into the hearts of those present, each having their own connection to Michael. Finally, the jury was sequestered to deliberate. A collective breath held across the courtroom as everyone wrestled with their fragmented emotions and opinions. Could justice prevail in a case marred by pride, passion, and the complexity of human relationships? As Emily gazed at the jury box, her heart raced, hoping that within the swirling doubts and the harsh reality of her brother's absence, some semblance of truth would rise to the surface, ready to shine light in the darkness. The aftermath. The verdict came down on a rain-slicked Thursday afternoon, thunder rumbling ominously outside the courthouse, as if mirroring the emotions swirling within. Jared Thompson was found guilty of second-degree murder, a decision that reverberated through Millstone like an unsettling tremor. Despite the sense of closure for some, for others, the tumult of grief and anger was far from resolved. As Emily sat among the crowd, a mix of relief and despair washed over her. The weight of her brother's memory loomed heavy, and the harsh reality of the verdict settled like fog, casting shadows over the joy that might have accompanied justice. Jared, stern-faced as he was, led away in handcuffs, left behind a gripping silence, not just in the courtroom, but across the town. The man, once eager to prove himself, had exchanged his dream for reality's cruel trial. In the days that followed, Millstone began to heal but bore irrevocable scars. Community members spoke in hushed tones about the events, wrestling with the implications of ambition gone awry. Art exhibits shifted from celebratory showcases to memorials for Michael, as artists displayed their pieces in remembrance, their colors in homage to the one who had inspired them. For Emily, the process of healing was more complex. Once surrounded by joyful memories of her brother, every room in their family home felt haunted, alive with echoes of laughter, now turned to whispers of loss. She spent late nights developing her own art, finding solace in brushstrokes, pouring her grief onto the canvas in the hopes of creating something tangible from the chaotic sorrow. "This is for you, Michael," she whispered to the empty room, hoping her words would somehow reach him. Seeking closure, Emily visited Michael's favorite mural on the side of a building in downtown Millstone. It depicted an explosion of colors that reflected his vibrant spirit. As she stood before it, the mural seemed to shimmer with life, and she felt a flicker of connection amidst the vast void. She brought fresh flowers and laid them at the base, feeling the balm of serenity wash over her. "The world needs your art," she murmured. To carry his memory forward, not just as a sister mourning her loss, but as a creative force ignited by love, resilience, and the urgency forgotten. The shadows of past violence were eclipsed by hope, not just for herself, but for everyone left behind in the aftermath of tragedy. With each stroke of her brush, she would honor Michael's spirit, embodying his dreams and aspirations, resolutely declaring that through art, he would always live on. Reflection. Months after the trial and the verdict, Millstone still breathed in the shadows of its haunting past. For Emily Hart, each day presented both a challenge and an opportunity to reflect on grief, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of art. As spring unfurled its petals outside, she felt the warmth of new beginnings while simultaneously wrestling with the void her brother had left behind. One afternoon, sitting on a weathered park bench with a sketch pad on her lap, Emily began to draw. She sketched the very mural that had become a symbol of her brother's passion, and dreams a burst of colors now submerged beneath the weight of her memories. The patterns that emerged were chaotic yet beautiful, much like her emotions, where sorrow intertwined inseparably with hope. As other artists gathered around to participate in a project honoring Michael's legacy, Emily felt a shift within herself. Together, they poured their hearts into the community art installation, weaving strands of personal stories into an intricate tapestry. Here, surrounded by lasting connections forged through shared grief, she grasped the truth. Michael's essence was alive, growing in the hearts of those he had inspired. And With each brush stroke, Emily felt liberated. The city had transformed, not just in physical structure, but in spirit. Millstone was healing, each mural across town a testament to the ties of love, loss, and creativity. Beauty could emerge even from the darkest of places. As she looked around, she recognized the collective strength they had cultivated together, each artist channeling their experiences into hopeful expressions, honoring those they had lost. Their stories entwined, rippling outward like whispers carried on the wind, reminding her fiercely that in the face of tragedy, resilience becomes the loudest anthem of all.